The screen is black, just sound. Papers shuffling, a gavel. A man's voice, cold, legal, final. Dr. Sarah Chen, you are hereby ordered to cease all operations of Chen and Associates Medical Clinic until the family dispute is resolved in civil court. My hands are shaking as I read the restraining order. 3 pages. Dated March 15th. I don't remember how I got to the lobby of the courthouse. I don't remember the fluorescent lights or the smell of institutional coffee or my brother David standing near the windows with his lawyer, a sleek woman in a navy suit who looks at me like I'm already defeated. David's wearing a burgundy tie. He bought it to look professional. I know because I bought him his first professional tie when he was interviewing for jobs at 23. Now he's using that look, the sympathetic one that means he's already decided something about me, as he nods to his lawyer and they both turn away. I can't operate my own clinic, the one I built, the one that took 9 years of my life. I stand in that courthouse hallway for 7 minutes. I know it's 7 minutes because I watch the second hand on my phone. I need to know exactly how long it takes for your world to become someone else's bargaining chip. That's when I realize something. They think I'm broken. But I'm not. I'm just getting started. Part 2, who I was. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 38 years old, or I was before last Tuesday. Now I'm 38 and something else, something harder, something that doesn't sleep well. But let me start before the courthouse. Let me start when I was still the person my family thought they could take from. I grew up in a house where success meant being useful. My father was a cardiac surgeon. My mother was a pharmaceutical consultant. My older brother David was in finance. My younger sister Michelle was a pediatrician. And me, I was the one who disappointed them by going into general practice. Not impressive enough, they said. Too ordinary. Why would I want to see common colds and anxiety disorders and diabetes management when I could specialize, when I could make real money? But I liked the ordinariness of it. I liked knowing Mrs. Patterson's blood pressure numbers by heart. I liked that I could take 20 minutes to explain to a young father why his son's eczema wasn't actually his fault. I liked that my work felt like helping actual people, not collecting achievements for a dinner party conversation. I worked at the community health center for 5 years. The pay was decent. The hours were manageable, but I was never mine. The clinic was owned by a corporation. The policies were set in some office building in Sacramento. The patients were a line item in a quarterly report. In 2015, I made a decision that my family called romantic. I was going to open my own clinic. My parents had the same conversation with me they'd probably rehearsed since I told them I wanted to be a doctor in the first place. My mother brought out her lawyer voice. My father brought out his disappointment voice. David sent me an email with a spreadsheet titled Financial Reality Check that I never opened. But there was one person who believed me. My grandmother. She was 81 years old. She'd been a nurse in Taiwan before she came to America with nothing but a suitcase and a certificate that wasn't recognized here. She'd learned English on the night shift. She'd raised 3 kids on a nurse's salary while her husband was sick. She'd never owned anything in her life except a small house she paid off in 2003. When I told her I wanted to open the clinic, she cried. Not sad tears, the other kind. I wish I had done this, she said. We were sitting in her kitchen. She was making dumplings, folding them with the kind of precision that only came from doing something 10,000 times. I wish I had been brave like you. She gave me $60,000, every penny of her retirement savings. Grandma, no, I said. I can't take this. You can, she said. You will. And you will never let anyone tell you it's theirs, you understand. This is yours. Everything you build is yours. I held that money like it was made of glass. It was. In a way, it was made of her life. I borrowed another $120,000. I got a small business loan. I worked 2 jobs for 6 months, 12-hour days, and saved every penny I could. I found a space in a walkable neighborhood, not fancy. A converted house in the Riverside district, 3 examination rooms, a small waiting area, a back office that was barely bigger than a closet. On January 3rd, 2016, Chen and Associates Medical Clinic opened its doors. I was 31 years old. I had 5 years of experience. I had no staff except for a part-time receptionist named Rosa who I paid more than I paid myself. I had patients who came because it was cheap and close, not because they thought I was good. I was terrified every single day that I would fail and lose my grandmother's retirement. But I didn't fail. I stayed late. I called patients back myself when they had questions. I worked weekends when emergencies came in without an appointment. I learned how to run a business by reading books at midnight and watching YouTube videos about accounting at 2 in the morning. By year 2, I had 2 full-time nurses and Rosa got an assistant. By year 3, I'd paid back half the small business loan and invested everything back into the clinic. New equipment, better technology. A second location I rented instead of owning because I wasn't ready for that kind of debt. By year 5, I was doing well, not rich, but stable, safe. My grandmother never took a penny back. I tried, many times. She refused every time. "This is yours," she would say. "I'm just proud." She died on September 14th, 2019. A stroke, quick, painless, she was 92. I was with her when it happened, in the hospital, holding her hand, and I promised her, even though she couldn't hear me anymore, that I would never let anyone tell me what was mine. I kept that promise for exactly 6 years. Part 3, the crack. David called me on a Tuesday in March, a regular Tuesday, nothing special. I was between patients. I remember this because I was eating a sandwich I'd bought from the deli next door, and I almost dropped it when I heard his voice. "Hey," he said, "do you have a minute?" He sounded strange, too casual, like someone testing ice to see if it would hold. "Sure," I said. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, I wanted to talk to you about something. Are you free this weekend?" I remember thinking this was odd. David and I weren't close like siblings are sometimes close. We were cordial. We appeared at family holidays. We texted on birthdays. But we didn't have conversations that required a special invitation. "What's this about?" I asked. There was a pause, long enough that I could hear him breathing. "It's about the clinic," he said. "Mom and I have been thinking about the future, about what happens to your business when something happens to you. Insurance, you know, succession planning, family stuff." He said family stuff like it was a comfort word, like it meant something protective. "I'm fine, David. My insurance is solid. I have a will." "Yeah, I know. But have you thought about bringing in outside investors? Or maybe making the business a family entity so there's more security?" I didn't answer right away. I was trying to understand what I was hearing. It sounded like a reasonable question. It felt like something else. "Why would I do that?" I asked. "Because," he said, and now his voice had changed. It was smoother. This was his finance voice, the one he used in board meetings. "You'd have capital to expand. The clinic could grow. You could open more locations. You could make real money, Sarah." There it was, the thing my family had always wanted to say. "You'd make real money if you just stopped being so stubborn about doing this alone." "I make enough money," I said quietly. "You could make more, and there are tax benefits if you bring the business into a family structure. I'm just saying." "You're saying you want to invest." "Not invest, more like restructure for everyone's benefit." I threw away my sandwich after that call. I couldn't eat. I sat in my office for 40 minutes while patients waited in the examination rooms, and I tried to understand what had just happened. But deep down, I already knew. My mother called the next day, then Michelle, then David again, but this time he brought my father into a conference call. It was very civilized, very reasonable. They were thinking about the future. They were worried about me. Wouldn't it be nice to have family support? Wouldn't it be better to formalize something they already were, a family? "We're already a family," I said. "Of course we are," my mother said, "but families also do business together. Your father and I were thinking about putting the clinic on the family foundation. That way it's protected. That way if something ever happened to you, Nothing's going to happen to me. But what if it does? Statistically, people die. People get sick. People get divorced. If the clinic is yours alone, all of that becomes complicated. I have a will. I've thought about this. A will goes through probate. It gets expensive. Everyone wants a piece. Lawyers get rich. Is that what you want? Wouldn't you rather have this handled quietly within the family? I remember standing up during that call, just standing up and moving to the window. I could see the parking lot, Rosa's car, the nurses' cars, one patient's car in the handicap spot. I need to think about this, I said. Of course, my father said, his doctor voice now, soothing, final. We're not asking for anything today. We just want you to understand that we're here to help. The word help sounded like a threat. I started paying attention after that. I started listening to the small things. At Easter dinner, my mother mentioned to Michelle that it was sad that the clinic was so small. That with proper management, it could really become something. David agreed. He talked about scalability. He used words like equity and assets and family legacy. My father was quieter, but he was always listening, always nodding, always making mental notes. One night in May, I got a text from my mother. Just a screenshot of an article about a doctor in Seattle who'd brought his family business into a larger entity and made millions. The caption just said, "You should read this. It might inspire you." In June, David started asking very specific questions about my clinic's finances. How much revenue? What were my profit margins? Did I have debt? Insurance? What about my patient numbers? How many referral sources did I have? I told him some things. I made up others. I lied because his tone had changed. It wasn't curious anymore. It was acquisitional. That's when I started to understand that this wasn't really about helping me. This was about taking what was mine. Part 4, the pressure. By August, they were bolder. My father called and said he wanted to invest in the clinic, not a normal investment, not something that would give me capital, something that would give him a stake. He used the word partner. He didn't use the word equal, but it was there in every sentence. You need a business manager, he said. Someone with real experience, let me help. I manage fine, I said. You manage adequately. There's a difference. I could feel him smiling through the phone. David sent me a formal document. It was a proposal to restructure Chen and Associates as a family-owned entity with diversified ownership. It was 20 pages long. It had charts. It had language about fiduciary responsibility and unanimous decision-making and family continuity. What it really said was, I own this now. We all own it. You don't get to choose anymore. I showed it to a lawyer. A woman named Patricia who had her office downtown and who looked at the document for about 60 seconds before she said, "Do not sign this, under any circumstances. This gives your family veto power over every business decision you make. This is not an investment. This is a hostile takeover dressed in family language." What do? I asked. You say no, you say it clearly, you say it once, and then you don't engage when they keep asking. But they kept asking. My mother started calling more frequently. Not about the clinic, about my life. Was I dating anyone? Did I want to get married? Didn't I want to have children? It was a new strategy, I realized. It was guilt. It was the subtext of, you need us, you need family, you need this security we're offering. It was calculated, but it was also something else. It was desperate. In September, my father changed tactics. He told me that my grandmother's retirement money was technically communal family wealth, and that since I'd used it to start the clinic should be considered a family asset. This was said very casually, at a Sunday dinner, in front of my mother and David and Michelle, who all suddenly became very interested in their plate. That's not true, I said quietly. The law might disagree with you, my father said. He was still eating, not even looking at me. Grandma gave it to me. That makes it mine. Grandma's gone, my mother said, and her voice had something in it that I'd never heard before, something cruel. She can't confirm that now, and technically she gave it to the family, to our family account. That's a lie, I said. "Is it?" my father asked. He finally looked up at me. "Do you have a contract? Do you have documentation?" I didn't. My grandmother had given me $60,000 in cash and checks. There was a deposit record. There was my word. There was her love. But there was no contract. That's when I understood the real game. It wasn't about helping me anymore. It was about proving that what I thought was mine had never actually been mine at all. In October, David's lawyer, the woman from the courthouse who would later stand next to him with that satisfied smile, started sending official letters. They were asking to see my business documentation. They were asking about my patient records. They were asking about my contracts with my nurses and my vendors. They were building a case. I didn't know what the case was yet, but I could feel it forming, like a storm you can't see but you can feel coming from miles away. Patricia told me to keep detailed records of everything, every expense, every decision, every conversation. She said, "If they're going to move against you, you need to be able to prove every single thing about your clinic." So I started documenting every text message, every email, every conversation I had with my family. I wrote down afterward. Times, dates, exact words. I felt paranoid. I felt crazy. I felt like I was the one doing something wrong by keeping records of what my own family was saying to me. But I kept going. November came, and Michelle reached out to me in a different way. She was always the soft one, the one who cried at movies, the one who actually seemed to care about people. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something," she said. We were having coffee. She'd driven across town to see me. That should have been my first warning. "Okay," I said. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I'm worried about you. Dad and David think the clinic is becoming a liability." A liability. For the family, they think that because it's operated as a sole proprietorship, any lawsuits against it could go after your personal assets, and then our family assets could be at risk. It's a legal thing, but also a money thing, and they're worried. I looked at my sister, and I tried to see where the lie started and stopped, because some of this was true. Some of this was legitimate business concern, but most of it was architecture. Most of it was designed to make me feel like I was the problem. "Michelle, are they planning to sue me or something?" She looked away. That was my answer. "They're not going to sue you," she said quietly. "They're going to ask the court to force the clinic to become a family asset. They're saying that since it was funded partially with family money, and since the family's financial security is tied to yours, they have a legal claim." "That's not how that works," I said. "Maybe not, but it might be how a judge decides it works if your family has a lawyer and you're defending yourself alone." She looked at me with something like pity, and that's when I knew she was in on it too, not in the aggressive way David was, not in the calculated way my father was, but she was in it. They all were. I had no allies, not one single person who was standing next to me and saying, "This is wrong. What they're doing is wrong." Not one. Part 5, the transformation. I don't cry anymore after that coffee with Michelle. Not because I'm strong, not because I'm tough, but because something inside me shifted. It was like a light going off and a different light coming on, the light of clarity, the light of someone finally seeing exactly what they're dealing with. I spent 1 week in what I would describe as shock. I went to work. I saw patients. I prescribed medications and checked blood pressure and listened to people's problems and solved them. I was a functioning human on the outside. On the inside, I was processing. What had I done wrong? I had worked hard. I had been respectful. I had welcomed my family's input when they asked for it. I had not been rude. I had not been dismissive. I had been a good daughter, a good sister. And they were taking from me anyway. That's when I understood something very important. Niceness doesn't protect you. Neither does working hard. Neither does being smart or kind or respectful. What protects you is being willing to fight back. And I wasn't willing yet, but I was going to be. On November 15th, I made a decision. I was going to stop defending myself. I was going to stop trying to convince them that what was mine was actually mine. I was going to stop being the good daughter who listens to her family's concerns and thinks about their ideas fairly. Instead, I was going to become someone they should have never underestimated. I called Patricia back and had a very different conversation. I want to know everything they can do, I said. I want to know every legal angle, every way they can come at me, and I want to know how to prepare for it. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Are you sure? Because once we go down this path, things get formal, things get hard." "They already are hard," I said. "I'm just going to stop pretending they're not." Patricia spent 3 hours with me that week. She explained the law to me. She explained how family businesses worked. She explained how courts might view my grandmother's gift. She explained in very clear terms that my family had a potential case, but that my case was stronger. As long as I had documentation, as long as I had evidence, as long as I could prove that I created this business and that they had no legitimate legal claim to it. "You need to do 3 things," she said, sitting in my office. "First, separate your finances completely. If any family money is mixed with clinic money, they have an argument. Second, document everything going forward, every single conversation, every promise, every threat. Third, protect your assets. Make sure your clinic can't be touched by creditors or family members if something happens to you." "How do I do that?" I asked. She showed me, and I listened, and I started planning. This was when I became someone different. I stopped taking my family's calls, not dramatically, I just wasn't available. When they texted, I responded hours later with brief messages. When they tried to have conversations, I was at work. I was with a patient. I had an emergency. I was withdrawing, and every day I withdrew a little more, I could feel them getting more desperate. My mother called and said she missed me. My father sent an email asking if I wanted to come to dinner. David texted a meme with a joke about how long it had been since we'd talked. They were losing me, and losing me was the only language I had that they seemed to understand. But this wasn't about punishment. This wasn't about making them feel bad. This was about creating space between us. Space where I could think. Space where I could plan. Space where I could become the person I needed to be. I stopped thinking of myself as their daughter and started thinking of myself as someone defending something valuable. I stopped thinking of them as family and started thinking of them as opposition. This was the most important shift, because when you think of someone as opposition, you stop trusting them. You stop assuming the best of them. You stop hoping they'll do the right thing. You just start planning. Part 6, The Architect. In December, I hired a forensic accountant. His name was Marcus. He had gray hair and he wore glasses that had slipped down his nose, and he looked at me like he'd seen this before. Many times. "Walk me through everything," he said. "Every penny, every transaction, every loan, everything." So I did. I brought him documents from 2015. I brought him my bank statements. I brought him my business tax returns and my personal tax returns. I brought him the loan agreement from the bank. I brought him the deed to my office building. Wait, that's important. I didn't own the building. I rented it. This was actually good. This meant the clinic itself was the asset, not the real estate. Marcus looked through everything for hours. Then he looked up at me and said, "You have good news. Almost no family money is traceable to the clinic. The loan is in your name alone. The business license is in your name. The patients are your patients. The staff is yours. This is clean. This is so clean that your family is going to have a very hard time arguing it's theirs." "What about the $60,000? I asked. "My grandmother's money. Do you have any documentation that it was a gift?" I shook my head. "That's the soft spot," he said. "But here's the thing. Even if a judge decides that was community money, which is a big if, it doesn't prove the rest of the clinic belongs to them. $60,000 9 years ago is not the same as owning a business today. A business that has generated hundreds of thousands of dollars, that has multiple employees, that has systems and patient relationships and reputation. You've built something real since then. That's yours." I hired a private investigator after that. Her name was Diane, and she was a former police detective who now worked for high-asset clients who were going through separations or business disputes. She was expensive. She was also exactly what I needed. "I want to know everything about my family," I said. "Everything, financial records, who they're talking to, what they're planning, all of it." Diane raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot to ask." "I'm paying you to do it anyway." "I can get legal financial information, their business filings, their property records, their lawsuits if they have any. What I can't do is illegal surveillance. I want to be clear about my boundaries." "I understand," I said, and I did. Over the next 2 weeks, Diane sent me files. David had a lot of wealth, more than I'd realized. He had investments. He had property. He had a summer house in Tahoe. He was also heavily invested in something called a medical device company that had been having trouble with the FDA. My father had significantly less liquid assets than I thought, but he had connections. Lots of connections, to hospital administrators, to judges, to lawyers who specialized in family law. My mother had no business experience, but had spent $30,000 in the past 6 months on consultations with business lawyers. "They're serious," Diane said, sitting in my office. "They've been planning this for a while. This isn't recent. This goes back further than you know." "How far?" I asked. "Based on the lawyer consultations, probably a year, maybe more. They've been gathering advice. They've been building their case incrementally." A year. They'd been planning to take my clinic for a year, and I'd been worried about whether I was being a good enough daughter. "What about David's lawyer?" I asked. "The woman I saw at the courthouse." Diane pulled out a file. "Margaret Steele. She specializes in family business law. She's good. She's expensive. She's also aggressive. She has a history of making situations very difficult for people until they settle." "She's intimidation," I said. "She's a weapon," Diane corrected. "And your family hired her, so they're serious about using her." I paid Diane another $15,000 to keep watching, to keep documenting, to let me know the moment something official happened, the moment they filed anything, the moment they made a legal move. Then I started my own documentation. I set up a shared clinic email account and forwarded it every text message my family sent me. I recorded every phone call, which is legal to do in a one-party consent state, and I live in a one-party consent state, which meant as long as I knew about the recording, it was legal. I created a folder on my personal computer. I labeled it Evidence. I put in every message, every conversation summary, every piece of communication that showed my family's intentions to take control of my clinic. I organized it by date. I added notes about context. I made it airtight. I was no longer a woman defending herself. I was a woman building a case. By January 15th, I had approximately 800 pages of documentation. Emails, text messages, call transcripts, financial records, proof of my grandmother's gift. I called the bank and got a record of the large cash deposit from her. Proof that I'd funded the clinic. Proof that I'd grown it. Proof that I'd worked 80-hour weeks for years to build something real. I also did something else. I started pulling my personal money out of the clinic. Not all of it, but I started moving my liquid assets to an account that had only my name. I set up an LLC in my personal name, Sarah Chen Professional Services, and I started diverting some of the clinic's revenue through it legally with proper accounting. This was totally above board. This was just smart. This was making sure that when my family tried to take the clinic, there was something else, something hidden, something safe. Diane looked at my plan and said, "You're becoming a difficult person to take advantage of." "Good," I said. In February, my family went quiet. No calls, no texts, no pressure, nothing. This was the scariest part, because silence meant they were moving. Silence meant they'd stopped trying to convince me and started getting ready to force me. Patricia confirmed this on March 10th. "They filed," she said over the phone. "This morning, they filed a petition with the court to force mediation on the clinic's ownership. They're claiming that the clinic is a family asset and that the original funding, your grandmother's money, was community property. What do I do? I asked. You show up, Patricia said, and you show them that they don't own anything. You show them that you're not the person they underestimated. Part 7, the revelation. But there's something I haven't told you yet. Something I found out in late February, while I was still collecting documentation and setting up my financial walls. I was working late, around 9 p.m. The clinic was empty except for me and the cleaning crew. I was in my office, reviewing medical charts when I got a call from an unlisted number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Dr. Chen? A woman's voice, professional, careful. Yes, I said. Who is this? My name is Susan Carmichael. I'm a business consultant. I worked for your father for approximately 8 months, ending in November of last year. I didn't say anything. I'm calling because I have some information that I think you should have. Information about the clinic, about your family's plans for the clinic. My hand was very steady as I pressed the record button on my computer. Go ahead, I said. Your father hired me to assess the viability of taking over your clinic. He wanted to know if it would be profitable as a family entity, if it was worth the legal fight. I conducted a full analysis. And I concluded that it would be, that your clinic is worth approximately $3.2 million, that it has strong patient retention, that the revenue streams are stable, that as a larger medical practice, if it were absorbed into a network or a larger corporate structure, it could generate significant value. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I quit. I quit because your father asked me to do something I wasn't comfortable with. He asked me to value the clinic in a way that would minimize its actual worth. He wanted to present a lower valuation to you in negotiations, while telling investors a higher one. He wanted to use my analysis to lowball you, then turn around and sell the clinic for significantly more money. I couldn't breathe for a moment. He's planning to sell it, I asked. He was. I don't know if the plans have changed since I left, but yes. The goal was to convince you to hand over a controlling stake, then consolidate that stake with family money and investors' money, and then sell the whole thing to one of the larger medical networks in the state. Your family would profit. You would get some percentage, but significantly less than what the clinic is actually worth. Significantly less than what you've built. How significantly less? I asked. Based on my analysis, about $2 million less. $2 million. They were trying to make me lose $2 million. Why are you telling me this? I asked again. Because I have daughters, she said, and if anyone did this to them, I'd want someone to tell them. She hung up after giving me the name of a colleague she'd worked with at the consulting firm, a man who still had access to my father's files and could provide more documentation if needed. I stayed in my office for another 3 hours that night. I didn't cry, I didn't call anyone, I didn't panic. I just sat there and I understood with perfect clarity exactly what my family had been planning to do. It wasn't just about control. It wasn't just about taking what was mine. It was about making money from taking what was mine. It was about orchestrating the theft of my business and then profiting from the sale. This was beyond betrayal. This was systematic fraud dressed up as family concern. And now I had a witness. I had her name on the recording. I had her phone number. I had Patricia's contact information who could help me use this statement. I had proof. The next day, I contacted the consultant's colleague. His name was James, and he agreed to meet me in a coffee shop far from my office, far from my family's eyes. He brought digital copies of my father's communications with the consulting firm, emails, contracts, payment receipts, all of it showing that my father had paid them to undervalue my clinic so he could defraud me. James said, "Your father explicitly told Ms. Carmichael that he wanted to present you with a family reality check." Those were his words. A way to make you understand that the clinic was too risky for you alone, and that it was fortunate that the family was willing to take it off your hands. He was going to gaslight me into thinking the clinic was failing, I said. That's the architecture of it, yes, James said. I paid him $5,000 for the files and his willingness to testify if needed. But I never told Patricia or my lawyer about this evidence. Not yet. Because I wanted to save this card. I wanted to save this for the right moment. I wanted to save it for when they were in the courtroom, under oath, swearing that they just wanted to help me. Swearing that they wanted to protect the family's interests. Swearing that they'd never intended to harm me or defraud me. I wanted to save it for when I could show a judge that every single word was a lie. Part 8. The Restraining Order. On March 12th, I received the court notice about the restraining order. I tried to operate the clinic for a few more days. Technically, I was allowed to see patients in consultation mode, just not authorize procedures or tests, but it became impossible. Without me, there's no clinic. I'm not just the owner, I'm the doctor. On March 13th, I went to the courthouse. I wore a navy suit. I wore my grandmother's jade pendant under my shirt. I wore shoes that hurt my feet a little bit because pain keeps you focused and alert. I did not wear a wedding ring, though I knew my family probably expected me to be there with a husband. I had never married. I had never felt like I had time. Now I understood that being alone might have been the best preparation for this moment. Patricia met me outside the courtroom. She'd reviewed all my documentation. She had copies of the evidence. She had printed statements from Marcus and Diane. She had affidavits and analysis and legal precedent. "Are you ready?" she asked. "No," I said, "but I'm going anyway." The courtroom was smaller than I expected, more intimate, more terrible. My family was already there, all of them. My mother, my father, David, Michelle, and Margaret Steele, David's lawyer, who looked at me with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing she's being paid to destroy someone. I sat down next to Patricia. My hands were placed flat on the table in front of me. I was breathing very slowly. The judge came in. A woman, thank God. Not because women are automatically more sympathetic, but because this particular woman was named Judge Catherine Morales, and she had a reputation for being very unimpressed by family manipulation. David's lawyer presented their case first. She talked about family responsibility. She talked about business structures. She talked about fiduciary duty and asset protection. She presented my father's consulting report, the one I'd later realize was fabricated with James' help. That suggested the clinic needed professional management to remain viable. She presented text messages from my mother to the consulting firm saying things like, "Sarah's so overwhelmed. We just want to help her." She presented emails from David to the consulting firm saying things like, "We're concerned about the clinic's ability to manage growth. We want to ensure it doesn't become a liability for the family." Every piece of evidence was designed to make me look like I needed help, like I was struggling, like my family was the hero. It was very effective. Then Patricia stood up. She presented the business's actual financials. She presented the loan documents. She presented my tax returns showing that I'd paid everything back myself. She presented the deed to the clinic showing that I was the owner. She presented Susan Carmichael's affidavit. There was a pause in the courtroom, a moment where my father's face changed, just slightly, but I saw it. "The consultant, Susan Carmichael, has provided a sworn statement," Patricia said, indicating that she was hired by the defendant. That's the father to deliberately undervalue Dr. Chen's clinic in order to facilitate what amounts to a fraudulent transfer of business ownership. The judge looked at my father. She looked at him for a very long time. "Is this true?" she asked him. My father didn't answer. Margaret Steele objected. She said the affidavit was inadmissible. She said it was hearsay. She said Susan Carmichael was a disgruntled employee. But the damage was done. Judge Morales spent the next 3 hours examining the evidence. She asked Patricia questions. She asked my family questions. She asked me to testify, and I testified for 90 minutes about how I built the clinic, how I funded it, how I grew it, and what my family had asked of me. At one point, she asked my father directly, "Did you or did you not hire a consulting firm to undervalue your daughter's business?" My father looked at his lawyer. Margaret Steele whispered something to him. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "I plead the fifth on that question." The judge's expression didn't change, but something in the courtroom shifted. At the end of the hearing, Judge Morales said she was going to take the case under advisement. She said she would issue a ruling within 30 days. But as she was leaving the bench, she said one thing to me. Dr. Chen, maintain excellent documentation of all clinic operations going forward. Continue to keep your business records secure and separate from any family finances. I suspect you're going to win this case, but I want you to be prepared for what happens next. What happens next? I asked. Your family might appeal, the judge said, or they might take a settlement. Either way, I'd recommend you be ready to cut all business ties with them, because trust, once broken in this way, doesn't repair itself. Part 9, the settlement. My family didn't appeal. Instead, they sent me a settlement proposal 5 days later. It was elegant in its simplicity. They would drop all claims to the clinic. They would sign a document saying they had no ownership stake and no legal right to any part of my business. In exchange, I would pay them $1 million. $1 million. Patricia called it a face-saving settlement. They'd lost so badly that they now needed money to cover their legal fees and their embarrassment. Do not take this deal, Patricia said firmly. You're going to win. Why would you pay them after they tried to defraud you? Because, I said, I want my family back. There was a long silence. No, you don't, Patricia said finally. You want to believe you can have your family back, but they showed you who they are. They showed you that they're willing to lie, scheme, and commit fraud against you. Paying them $1 million won't change that. It will just give them money and teach them that fraud is profitable. I knew she was right. But I called David anyway. I got your settlement proposal, I said. Yeah, he said, and he sounded tired. He sounded like a person who'd been defeated. I'm not taking it, I said. Sarah, I'm not taking it because I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't try to steal from you. I didn't try to defraud you. I didn't hire people to undervalue your property or gaslight you into thinking you needed my help. That's not what we did, David said. Yes, it is, and I have the evidence. Susan Carmichael testified. James has the files. You have no case. And I'm not paying you for the privilege of letting you stay in my life. So what are you saying? He asked, and I could hear fear in his voice now. I'm saying goodbye, I said. Then I hung up the phone. That was the last conversation I had with my brother. Part 10, the victory. Judge Morales issued her ruling on April 20th. She ruled that the clinic was my sole and separate property. She ruled that the claim to my grandmother's money was unfounded. The bank records clearly showed it was a gift, and the statute of limitations on contesting it had long passed. She ruled that the consulting firm's analysis was inadmissible because it had been created with the intent to defraud. She ruled that my family had no legal basis for their suit, and in fact, had acted in a manner that showed clear and deliberate intent to commit fraud against a family member. She ordered my family to pay my legal fees, all of them, $153,000. She issued a permanent order restraining my family from any further legal action against the clinic or against me personally without the permission of the court. The restraining order that had closed my clinic was lifted immediately. On April 21st, I opened my doors again. Rosa was waiting outside when I arrived. She had tears in her eyes. I knew you'd win, she said. I always knew. I won't say I felt triumphant. I felt something, but it wasn't that simple. It was victory mixed with loss. It was justice mixed with the realization that justice doesn't restore what was broken. My mother sent me a text message a week after the ruling. Just one sentence. I hope you're happy now. I didn't respond. My father never contacted me again. Neither did David. Michelle sent me a message saying she was sorry for everything and that she understood if I didn't want to see her anymore. I didn't respond to that either. Because what I understood, what I finally, clearly understood, was that some relationships don't deserve to be repaired. Some betrayals are too fundamental. Some people look at you and see dollar signs instead of a daughter, a sister, a person worth protecting. But something else happened. When I reopened the clinic, I had more patients than before. People in the neighborhood had followed the court case in the local news. They knew that I'd fought for my business. They knew that I'd won. They knew I was the kind of person who would fight for them the same way. By the end of that year, I'd opened 2 more clinics. Not with my family, with Rosa and with the 2 nurses who'd stuck with me through the whole thing. We structured it as a real partnership, with legal documents and clear percentages and mutual respect. We grew deliberately. We grew carefully. We grew in a way that meant we each owned what we'd built. My grandmother's money, the seed that started everything, finally had the legacy she'd imagined. But more than that, I had something else. I had my life back. I had my work back. And I had the absolute clarity of knowing that I'd underestimated myself far less than my family had. Epilogue. 3 years later, I was invited to speak at a business conference about family dynamics and entrepreneurship. I almost didn't go. But then I thought about all the people who'd watched my case unfold. All the women who'd written to me saying that my story had given them courage. All the people who'd realized that what they thought was normal family pressure was actually manipulation. I decided to go. I told the full story, I showed the evidence, I played excerpts from the court case, and at the end I said this. I want to talk about one thing that doesn't make it into the headlines. It's the moment you realize that the people who hurt you are just people. They're not monsters. They're not villains in a movie. They're just people making choices. Bad choices. Selfish choices. Choices that hurt you. But choices they made because they could. Because they thought they'd get away with it. Because they didn't believe you were strong enough to stop them. That moment, when you understand that the people you love are also the people who can hurt you, that's the moment everything changes. That's when you stop waiting for them to do the right thing and you start becoming the kind of person who does the right thing for yourself. I didn't win this case because I'm smarter than my family or tougher than them. I won because I understood that this wasn't about reconciliation. This wasn't about making them see how they'd hurt me. This wasn't about proving I was right. This was about survival. This was about protecting something I'd built. This was about being willing to do what needed to be done. And that is a choice. Every single day, it's a choice. You can hope they'll change. You can pray they'll do right by you. Or you can make the hard choice to protect yourself, to document everything, to build your case, to fight. I chose to fight, and I'm still fighting. Not against my family anymore. But every single day, I'm fighting to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. I'm fighting by being successful. I'm fighting by being strong. I'm fighting by showing up and proving that women who own their own businesses, who take no shit, who refuse to be gaslit or manipulated, those women win. That's the story. That's the only real story that matters. I'm 41 years old now. I've never been married. I've never had children. And I've never regretted a single moment of putting my energy into building something that's mine. My grandmother would have been proud.